The idea that Dana Perino is now taking her cues from AOC is actually, I don't know how really to deal with this, but it's sort of fascinating just to see how much the idea that one person can be dominating the narrative like this. And it's not terribly different from stuff that Bernie was saying, but it does sort of take it a step further, I think, in some ways. And she's just more representative, frankly, of what is now becoming the largest voting bloc in the country, and that is millennials. But here is Dana Perino, who launched her career, or first became a national figure by lying on behalf of the Bush administration and their insatiable lust for war.
He is the intellectual leader of the left.
That's sad, Dana.
And the polls are backing that up.
Pause it. She said, we cut it off just a little bit there. She says that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the intellectual leader of the left, and Jesse Waters says that's sad.
Backing that up. And they're all having to respond to her. We'll see how they handle their Donald Trump, right? I just said in the break that I would love to sit next to President Obama while he listens to something like that and to hear what he thinks, because it would be interesting to hear. Some of her ideas, right, it's not just that they're unaffordable, it's that they're bad ideas. And so then how do you counter those bad ideas? Even if they are directionally true in her mind, then you got to explain why they're bad ideas, and we could give you a million examples. I'm going to tell you where I think the Democrats have a good point on the economic argument against President Trump. The way you hear them frame it, and I think the Republicans better pay attention to this, it's that there was a tax cut was for the rich. It absolutely helped the rich. You look at the stock market, look at what the companies did. They bought stock back. They didn't reinvest. You have billionaires that are wealthier. You have wages that have only gone up 2%.
Knock it off, Dana.
I'm just telling you,
Wow.
If you read Mary Ann Marsh, she is often frequently seen on Fox News. She writes at foxnews.com. She writes a piece this week that I think they have a way to make an economic argument against President Trump, and the Republicans better pay attention.
Okay, we love when you give advice to Democrats, Dana. Don't we?
They don't take it. Nobody.
God, he is the worst.
He is the worst,
He
right?
is the worst. I mean, viscerally, my stomach churned looking at him.
The interesting thing is, and that's absolutely true, the interesting thing is that no one at the table even attempts to refute those pretty damning points. I mean, I'm sure there's other stuff that the left is critiquing, but that's a big part of the critique.
They rushed off that point. I mean, this is deviating from the talking points that we know Fox News has given. That's Dana joined DSA. Well, she should join it. But I just mean that I think it's fascinating, the phenomenon of, you mentioned Bernie Sanders. The response to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the media obsession with her versus Bernie Sanders, he's kind of seen as this fringe person where she's dominating the coverage as just a freshman congresswoman. And I'm kind of going a little off topic here, but I do think it's fascinating how some liberals, white liberals especially, are responding to AOC versus Bernie Sanders. They are so inundated with wanting to appear accepting and wanting to think about identity politics in a lot of ways that they are so quick to accept her and want to like her and want to seem like they like her, but still have this hatred of Bernie Sanders. And I think it's allowing, in this kind of perverse way, for his ideas to permeate parts of the left and parts of the center that otherwise wouldn't be
She's a Trojan horse.
There's no doubt.
be paying attention.
Although I think on the flip, like as an example, at some point, if Bernie runs, I think she's definitely going to have to endorse him.
Oh, she'll endorse.
Right, and I'm sure she will. And so then that oh yeah, look at her clapping back. Because it is interesting, because I think it's like, on one hand, she's changing the whole terrain of the tax debate for everybody. So it's a huge success. But there's another chunk of people in the group you're talking about that relate to politics like pop culture. So she's just like another person that's like, look at her own on Twitter, look at her this and that.
I think that's true. But I think Emma's point is well taken. There are there is not the chill towards the ideas that she's espousing, which are, I mean, in many respects, not dissimilar to the ones that Bernie were espousing. I don't want to say they're identical, but they're more or less
quite
identical.
similar.
I mean, it's not like they were Bernie's ideas. He was just like the only one
would
talking
say it.
about it in who was an elected representative, and they seem much more amenable to that. You know, it's interesting. Sean McKelwey, who we've had once or twice. Do you know him from Data Progress? Are you familiar with his work?
I'm familiar with the name.
He was abolish ICE for a while on Twitter, and now I can't remember exactly what
I know.
he's promoting.
I know who you're talking about.
Now it's
But
reform ICE.
his outfit does a lot of data work for various progressives, sometimes candidates, sometimes other groups, and he has been saying for some time that progressive ideas combined with a strong candidate who represents women of color is the winning recipe for Democrats in a vast majority of seats, because the all of those things align. You want someone who looks like the people that they're representing, because people like to think that their representative understands their issue sets. And one of the ways that you do that is you look and you see, do they look like me on some level? And she undeniably has mainstreamed ideas, not just broadly speaking, but with people who were specifically resistant
To Bernie.
to Bernie, because of issues without judging why they were resistant to him. Okay, I think in some instances it was sincere, in some instances it was just sort of like irrational resent. Whatever.
I will use this anecdotal example of my lovely parents, right, who are centrist Democrats that worship Obama, and their worship civility and the institutions and Democrat, blah 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 blah. Love, they're trip over themselves to love AOC, but then Bernie, it's like, did you hear about that sexism in his campaign? And it's frustrating because I think he's the godfather of all of this, but maybe it will come full circle in 2020. We'll have to see. But I do think his identity is going to be an issue.
I mean, without a doubt.